I refused to kneel, and the alien queen girl whispered, "Then stand beside me." The palace did not feel like stone. It felt like a living thing, breathing light through its towering windows, and watching every step like it could remember the names of the dead. Kale stood at the foot of the raised platform, one hand still gripping the strap of his worn pack, the other hanging open at his side, as if he had already surrendered. But his spine refused to bend. All around him, soldiers formed a dark line, helmets low, rifles held with a calm that was worse than rage. They did not shout, they did not rush, they simply waited, as if time itself belonged to them. Above them, curtains the color of pale sky hung in tall waves, and the bright, diffused daylight made the hall look holy, like a temple built for a god who never forgave. Kale lifted his eyes, and there she was, center frame, still as a statue, the young queen of this world, her crown a heavy sun of gold and jewels, her gown a marriage between royal history and war. Light blue and white, trimmed with gold, armored with elegance, her face held no fear, no heat, no softness, only that calm, serious stare that made men forget their own breath. The interpreter beside Kale whispered, voice trembling, "Kneel." Kale heard it, and he also heard the warning behind it. Kneel or you will not leave this hall. Kneel or your people will pay for your pride. Kneel or you will be made into an example. He had knelt before, on muddy battlefields, in narrow tunnels, in the shadow of broken ships. He had knelt beside friends who stopped breathing. He had knelt to pull children from rubble. He had knelt not for power, but for life. This was different. This was theater. This was control. This was a demand that his soul be folded like paper and placed in someone else's pocket. The hall fell quieter. Even the curtains seemed to stop moving. The commander of the Queen's Guard took one step forward, and the sound of his boots echoed like a gavel. Kale felt every eye on him. Human and alien, soldier and court, predator and witness. The interpreter swallowed and tried again. Kneel, or they will fire. Kale's throat tightened, but he did not look away from the queen. He spoke slowly, so the translator could keep up, and so the soldiers would hear that his voice was steady. "I will not kneel." The words were small, but they landed heavy. A ripple passed through the line of guards, a shift of weight, a slight lift of weapons, a change in breathing. The commander raised his hand, and Kale saw the next moment forming. Saw it like a flash of the future, the rifles rising, the white hall turning red, the story of first contact collapsing into a massacre. He could have stopped it. He could have bent. He could have performed the kneel. He could have traded his dignity for survival. And a part of him begged him to do it, because survival was not a romantic thing. Survival was ugly and desperate and practical. But then he saw her eyes, not cold, not cruel, sharp, as if she had been waiting for someone to refuse, as if the refusal was not an insult, but a key. The commander's hand hovered in the air, and the rifles tilted upward another inch. Then the queen lifted her fingers, just too subtle, precise. The line of soldiers froze. The commander stiffened like he had been struck by lightning, his hand stopping mid-command, his jaw tightening, as if he wanted to argue but could not. The queen's gaze remained on Kale, and when she spoke, her voice did not echo like a shout. It slid across the hall like silk over steel. The translator blinked hard, listening through the device at her throat, then turned to Kale, almost afraid to repeat the words. She says, then the queen herself leaned slightly forward, not enough to appear needy, not enough to appear weak, just enough to make the entire room lean with her, and she whispered, not to the translator, not to the guards, but to Kale, in a way that felt impossible, as if the hall had carried the meaning straight into his chest. Then stand beside me. Kale did not move at first. His mind screamed that this was a trap, a beautiful trap, the kind that snaps shut with velvet. But the queen's hand remained lifted, the rifles remained still, and the air itself seemed to wait for his answer. The interpreter stared at Kale with wide eyes, pleading without words. The commander of the guard looked like a man choking on his own authority. Kale took one step forward. The soldiers did not fire. He took another. The light from the windows poured over him. And for a moment, his patched jacket and worn boots looked like they belonged in a story written by someone who believed in miracles. He climbed the first step of the platform, and the hall responded with a whispering tension, like a crowd holding its breath before a verdict. Kale reached the top, and now he was close enough to see the details of her crown. The tiny jewels like captured stars, the gold filigree like ancient language. He was close enough to see her face clearly, young, yes, but not innocent. She had the look of someone who had survived the kind of pressure that reshapes a person forever. Kale stopped one pace away, as close as the guards would allow without panicking. The queen's eyes flicked to his hands, empty, open, then back to his face. The commander stepped forward again, voice harsh. And although Kale did not understand the language, he understood the anger. This was not protocol. This was not allowed. This was not how rulers were treated. The queen turned her head just slightly, and her calm became a blade. The commander stopped speaking mid-sentence. Kale felt something shift in the room. Not just fear, but obedience, and underneath it, something older, something like dread. The queen returned her gaze to Kale, and her voice softened. Not into kindness, but into something intimate. "You will not kneel," she said. And the translator's device carried the meaning cleanly, like a perfect cut. Kale swallowed and answered with the only truth he had. "I came to talk, not to worship." Another ripple, stronger this time. Kale felt the soldiers behind them stiffen, and the human crew members farther back tremble like they were standing on thin ice. The queen studied Kale's face, as if she could read every loss he carried. Then she asked quietly, "Why did you come?" Kale could have given the official answer. First contact, alliance, exchange, peace. But the hall did not feel like a place for official lies. So he said the truth that had kept him awake for weeks. "Because your ships did not attack us, not at first. Because you could have destroyed us, but you didn't. Because someone out there is pushing the worlds into war, and if we do not find the reason, my people will die, and yours will die too." The queen's expression did not change, but her eyes did, a flicker fast, almost hidden recognition. Kale's heart turned heavy. "You already know," he thought. "You already know what is coming." The queen took a slow breath, then looked past Kale toward the high windows, toward the flood of light, toward the sky that felt too clean to be real. Then she said, as if speaking to the whole hall and only to herself at once, "They will not allow peace." Kale felt the words hit him like cold water. "Who?" he asked. The queen turned back to him, and her voice dropped lower. "The ones who kneel behind thrones," she said. Kale frowned, and the translator hesitated, confused by the metaphor, then corrected the meaning as the device adjusted. "The ones who rule without crowns." Kale's skin prickled. He thought of human generals, corporate councils, hidden syndicates. He thought of the rumors he was not supposed to repeat. The missing supply convoys, the sabotaged satellites, the dead diplomats. He forced his voice to stay steady. "If you know this, why invite us here? Why risk showing weakness by letting me stand?" The queen's gaze sharpened again, and for the first time Kale felt something like pain under her calm. Old pain, trained pain, hidden pain. "Because I am not the one in power," she said. And the room seemed to tilt around that confession. Kale stared. "You are the queen." The commander's jaw clenched, like he wanted to deny her words. The soldiers stood rigid, their discipline strained like rope. The queen's lips barely moved as she continued. "I wear the crown, I speak the decrees, I sit on the throne, but the empire does not belong to me." Kale's voice turned rough. "Who does it belong to?" The queen's eyes went to the line of soldiers behind her, not accusing, not afraid, simply acknowledging the cage. Then her gaze returned to Kale, and she said one word that the translator could not soften. "The choir." The sound of it made the interpreter flinch, like a curse had been spoken. Kale had heard fragments about them. A myth in military briefings, a shadow in intercepted signals, a faction that moved between systems, that appeared in the aftermath of wars, that harvested the winners and erased the losers. The queen stepped closer, breaking another rule, and the commander's hand twitched. Kale stood still, refusing to retreat, refusing to show fear. The queen's voice became softer still, a thread pulling him closer. They made me a symbol, she said. They shaped me into a face the empire would follow. And they taught me to smile without love and command without mercy. Kale felt anger rise, hot and protective, because he saw it now. This was not a girl playing queen. This was a girl surviving the throne. He lowered his voice. Then why choose me? Why tell me? The queen looked at him as if the answer was already written across his scars. Because you are the only one who did not kneel, she said, and her words carried more than pride. They carried desperation. In that moment, Kale understood the danger he had stepped into. If he stood beside her, he was not just an envoy. He was a challenge, a public crack in the illusion. The hall remained frozen, the soldiers waiting, the human delegation trembling behind, the light pouring down like judgment. Kale asked the question that terrified him. What happens now? The queen lifted her hand again, not to command rifles, but to summon something else. Two attendants approached, silent, elegant, and placed a thin object between them. A narrow band of shimmering metal, a ceremonial link. Kale understood without translation. A bond display, a public declaration. A political chain disguised as honor. The commander's eyes gleamed, like he believed the trap had finally closed. The queen looked at Kale, and for the first time her calm face cracked into something human. Something almost pleading. Stand beside me, she repeated. And this time it was not a command, it was a request. Kale's mind raced. If he refused now, he might die, and the humans might be slaughtered. And the queen might be punished for offering him this chance. If he accepted, he might become the bait. In a war he barely understood, but he had come here to stop a war. He had come here because something had felt wrong in the universe. He took a slow breath, and made the choice that would haunt him. He stepped closer, and lifted his hand toward the ceremonial link. The hall shifted. Like a beast sensing blood, the attendants fastened the shimmering band around Kale's wrist. Then around the queen's, a delicate bridge between them. It was light, almost weightless, but Kale felt the meaning of it like iron. The queen lifted their joined hands just slightly, not a victory, not a romance. A signal, a statement. The interpreter whispered, barely audible, this is not just honor, this is protection. By law they cannot execute you while you are linked to her. Kale's stomach dropped. So this was her shield, and his. The queen looked at Kale, and her whisper slid into his ear again, personal, urgent. Do not trust the ones who cheer, she said. They will smile when you stand, and they will applaud when you fall. Kale's voice came out low. Then tell me who I can trust. The queen's eyes softened. Just a fraction. Trust the ones who are afraid, she said. They still remember what it cost to lose. Then she turned, facing the hall, and began to speak in her language, steady, royal, unshakable. The translator's device carried the meaning. Today the human stands. Today the empire listens. Today we begin the trial of peace. A wave of murmurs rolled through the soldiers and court. Some faces tightened in anger, some widened in surprise, some glowed with secret satisfaction. Kale watched them carefully, remembering her warning. Do not trust the ones who cheer. He saw it then, a soldier near the back, helmet slightly tilted. Body too relaxed, as if he was not shocked, not threatened, not afraid. As if he had been waiting for this moment to arrive. The soldier lifted two fingers briefly. A gesture so small that anyone could miss it. But Kale did not, because it matched the queen's earlier signal. But it was wrong. The angle was wrong. The timing was wrong. It was imitation. It was a message meant for someone else. Kale's pulse quickened. The choir, he thought. They are here, inside the palace, inside the line of guards. The queen continued speaking, and the hall obeyed. But Kale felt the invisible net tightening. A trumpet-like sound rose from somewhere beyond the platform. Ceremonial, bright, forced. The court began to applaud. A controlled storm of approval. Kale turned slightly, scanning faces, and he saw another sign, an attendant near a column. Eyes down, hands clasped, trembling, afraid. "Trust the ones who are afraid," the queen had said. Kale caught the attendant's eye for a heartbeat. And the attendant's lips moved in a silent warning. Behind. Kale's body reacted before his mind finished the thought. He shifted, stepping half a pace closer to the queen, turning his shoulder as if to shield her casually. In that same instant, a muffled snap cut through the applause. Not a rifle, something smaller, a needle gun, silent, designed for a palace. Kale felt the sting in his own shoulder, hot and sharp. His vision flashed white. He would have fallen, but the ceremonial link between his wrist and the queen's wrist yanked him just enough to keep him upright. The queen's head turned, eyes narrowing, and in that calm face Kale finally saw fury, quiet and absolute. She lifted her hand, and the soldiers surged, not toward Kale, but toward the back line, moving like a wave that knew exactly where the poison had come from. The applause died, replaced by shouts, boots, confusion, the sound of a court realizing it was not safe. Kale's knees threatened to buckle, his breath turning thick. The drug was fast. The queen caught him, her hand steady on his arm, her grip stronger than it looked. She leaned close, and her whisper was sharp enough to cut through the haze. "Stay with him." The all-caps word struck Kale's brain like a slap, and he forced his eyes to stay open. He heard distant weapons clatter, heard bodies collide, heard the commander yelling orders. Then he felt himself being pulled, guided, moved. Queen led him, not down the stairs, not toward safety that everyone could see, but toward a narrow gap between curtains and stone, toward a hidden door built into the palace like a secret. The guards tried to follow, but the queen's voice snapped, and they stopped, held back by law and fear. Kale stumbled through the hidden doorway with her, and the world changed. The bright ethereal hall vanished, replaced by a narrow passage of cold stone and dim blue light. The queen pressed her palm to a panel, and the wall slid shut behind them, cutting off the noise like a severed cord. Kale leaned against the stone, breathing hard, fighting the drug, fighting the darkness creeping up. The queen stood close, the crown still on her head, the jeweled gown still perfect. But here in the hidden corridor, she looked younger, smaller, and more real. Kale's voice came out strained. "They tried to kill you." The queen's eyes stayed locked on his. "They tried to kill you," she corrected. "Because they cannot kill me in public. Not yet. Not while the empire still believes my crown is sacred. But they can kill the one who stands beside me, and make the world kneel again." Kale swallowed, forcing the truth through his thickening tongue. "Then we hit them back." The queen's lips tightened, and she nodded once. A queen's nod, but something else lived behind it, a girl's relief that she was not alone. She stepped closer, and her voice turned into a whisper that felt like a pact. "If you stand beside me," she said, "you must understand what you are standing against. The choir is not just a group, it is a system. It is a hunger. It feeds on obedience. It grows in silence. It wears laws like masks." Kale breathed in, and the air tasted like stone and destiny. "Tell me," he said. "Tell me how to hurt them." The queen reached up, and for the first time she touched the ceremonial link between their wrists like it was not a chain, but a bridge. She looked into Kale's eyes, and her calm returned, not as a cage, but as a weapon. "First," she said, "we survive tonight. Second, we make the palace believe the attempt failed because the queen is protected by her chosen ally. Third, we find the voice that sings the orders, and we cut it out of the choir." Kale's head swam, but his focus sharpened around one thought. This was no longer diplomacy. This was war. Hidden inside ceremony, he forced a weak smile, the kind that only soldiers share in moments of impossible odds. "You asked me to stand beside you," he said, and he lifted their linked wrists slightly. I am still standing, the queen's eyes flickered. And in that flicker Kale saw something he had not expected to find in an alien palace. Hope, not the soft kind, the dangerous kind, the kind that makes people rise. The queen leaned in, close enough that her whisper became a vow. Then stand until the universe hears us, she said. Kale's vision blurred at the edges, but he held the line of her gaze, and he understood the truth that would change his life. He had refused to kneel, and now he had become the one person in the empire who could not fall without shaking the throne itself. Behind the hidden door, the palace roared with confusion, with searching boots, with false orders and real panic. Ahead, the corridor stretched into deeper shadows, like the throat of a sleeping beast. And beside him, the alien queen girl began to walk, not away from danger, but toward it, pulling him with her. Kale pushed off the wall and followed, forcing his legs to move, forcing his lungs to work, forcing his will to stay awake, because he could feel it. The choir moving, adjusting, preparing the next strike, and he knew, with a clarity that cut through the drug and fear, that the real hook of this story was not the crown, not the soldiers, not the palace, not even the assassination attempt. The real hook was the whisper that had turned him from an outsider into a symbol. Then stand beside me. And the universe, listening from the dark between stars, had just been dared to choose a side.